Thank you very much. Yeah, so the title of my presentation is Cost of Being a Good Neighbor. My name is Scott Cowden. I've been doing odor control for over 30 years. I'm a licensed professional in multiple states in the United States. So we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a good neighbor. So we want to kind of define what that means. What does it mean to be a good neighbor? So as population densities increase and residential areas encroach closer to wastewater treatment plant property boundaries, there's less tolerance with communities in terms of putting pressure on facilities to implement good neighbor policies. The term good neighbor can apply to multiple criteria, including odors, noise, aesthetics, and even safety. But in the context of this presentation, the term pertains exclusively to odor emissions control. So for this study, as Incan indicated, it was a web study that we did multiple years ago. I've updated some of the numbers, but in this study, the objectives of the current study included describing what the top performers are doing and spending on odor control and developing cost metrics for the top performing agencies, including plant-related costs and collection system costs, and providing some lessons learned from these top performing agencies. And we even asked some questions for the agencies, like how much are you spending? Is it enough? Is the money being spent in the right places? Do you think you can do better? So the agencies that were selected, we looked at the top five odor performing utilities or agencies, and these included Northern California agency, a Southern California agency, a Nevada agency, a Pacific Northwest agency, and a Southeast agency. And we selected these 5 top performers based upon 3 criteria: reputation, like their recognition as a good neighbor by the community; diversity, kind of their unique approaches to odor control; and sensitivity. All 5 agencies are located in relatively sensitive urban locations and therefore are required to comply with very strict regulatory and local requirements. The agency characteristics were very diverse in terms of average dry weather flows, population served, and miles of pipeline, as you can see in this table. In this next slide, you can see more diversity in terms of the odor management approaches in for the 5 agencies. Quite a diverse approaches in terms of liquid phase treatment, vapor phase treatment, and containment. So let's get into the results of the study. In this first part, we're going to talk about the CapEx, or capital expenditure, the costs per average dry weather flow. And when we look at the CapEx costs, we broke down those costs into both the wastewater treatment plant costs in terms of vapor phase control, containment, meaning covers and enclosure, what have you, liquid phase control, and then also collection system costs, including vapor phase control, liquid phase control, and containment. And you'll see here, when we compare the Northern California and the Southern California agencies, you'll notice they're pretty similar in terms of the plant vapor phase cost category being the primary kind of dominant cost when compared to the other cost categories, with plant containment being the second largest contributor. This next slide, we're comparing the Pacific Northwest agency to the Nevada agency in terms of capital expenditures. And you'll notice that the Pacific Northwest agency is unique in that their plant vapor phase capital cost category far exceeds all the other categories. This is because for this particular plant, they were focused on maintaining an off-site odor goal, which is the most stringent in the whole country. So they had multi-stage treatment systems, which were very costly. And then on this next slide, we have the Southeast agency, and you can see again that's pretty similar to the Pacific Northwest agency from the standpoint of the plant vapor phase cost being the primary kind of dominant cost category. Again, focusing on strict off-site odor goals, so spending quite a bit of money on plant vapor phase. So some of the takeaways from the CapEx cost comparisons. The capital cost related to wastewater treatment plant vapor phase odor control was by far the largest category for all the 5 agencies. For Northern California, Southern California, and Nevada, they spent slightly less on vapor phase odor control at the treatment plant versus the Pacific Northwest and the Southeast plants, again, because the Pacific Northwest and the Southeast plants had more stringent off-site odor goals, so they spend more money on vapor phase odor control systems at the plant. The associated capital costs for liquid phase treatment always tends to be pretty small compared to other categories. And then for wastewater treatment plant containment costs are pretty high, can be significant, should not be neglected. Let's talk about the OPEX, OPEX costs, operating and maintenance costs per average dry weather flow. And for this, we broke down the the OPEX costs, again, based upon wastewater treatment plant costs for vapor phase, process costs, and liquid phase treatment, and also collection systems in terms of vapor phase and liquid phase. The OPEX costs included electrical, labor rates, chemical usage, media usage, replacement, potable and non-potable water usage, and process costs, kind of hidden costs in there too. So you notice in this one, we're comparing Northern California and Southern California O&M costs, and you'll notice here that for Southern California, their OPEX costs pertaining to the collection system was very, very significant. We'll talk more about that here in a minute. In this next slide, we're comparing the Pacific Northwest O&M costs to the Nevada O&M costs, and you'll see that the OPEX cost contribution is very high for the Pacific Northwest in terms of the plant vapor phase. Again, this is because they've got the most stringent off-site odor goal in the nation at this particular plant, so they're spending a lot of not just capital, but now operating O&M costs as well for their plant vapor phase systems. Nevada is more balanced in terms of looking at the collection system liquid phase and the plant vapor phase. Their costs are pretty balanced. And then for the Southeast plant, looking at OPEX costs, you'll see again, pretty similar to the Pacific Northwest. Plant vapor phase, OPEX costs quite high. Again, focusing on that stringent offsite odor goal. So some of the takeaways here for the OPEX comparison, the O&M costs were quite varied for all 5 agencies and reveal kind of a wide range of approaches that each agency has implemented based on their unique conditions. The combined O&M costs for wastewater treatment plant vapor phase and odor control, and collection system liquid phase were all very high for all agencies, representing about between 70 and 90% of all the costs. So that was those are the dominant costs for all 5 agencies. For the Pacific Northwest and Southeast agencies, again, the wastewater treatment plant vapor phase O&M costs were high, representing about 75% of all the costs. And that's again because they've got very stringent offsite odor goals there. And for the Southern California agency, very high O&M costs in relation to the collection system, again, because they've got a very large collection system in a very densely populated area with high sensitivity receptors throughout the collection system. Yeah, let's look at per capita costs for these 5 agencies. And you'll note that the range is quite a range here from less than $5 per capita per year to almost $35 per capita per year. And that's because, again, that Pacific Northwest kind of jumps out there. That agency's got a very strict offsite odor goal, and they're about 6 times the cost of other agencies because they're trying to maintain that strict offsite odor goal. So some conclusions and takeaways here, the last slide. Offsite odor goal selection is critical. CapEx and OPEX are directly proportional to the fence line odor goals. More stringent offsite odor goals can result in capital costs that per capita costs that are more than 6 times other comparable high performing agencies. Prioritization of odor control dollars, knowing where to spend odor control dollars must begin with understanding the sources of odor at the wastewater treatment plant. This can be done with measurement, monitoring, even modeling. High hidden costs can be significant. Hidden costs can be significant in terms of process-related costs, in terms of how you choose what odor control approach can impact what's happening at the treatment plant. Agency uniqueness, there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Each agency has unique conditions, sensitivities, system processes, preferences, and sewer network configurations which drive odor control decisions. And then long-term OPEX considerations, long-term operating costs cannot be understated, and they need to be looked at when deciding on what odor control approach to go with. And then finally, public relations are a major driver in being a good neighbor. Building trust with adjacent communities and inviting the public into an agency's plans for future facilities is crucial, it's critical. And each agency must work hard to build and maintain public trust and allocate resources needed to control odors and be a good neighbor. So agencies are not perfect, but perfection is the goal. So with that, I'll take any questions that might come up.
Thank you, Scott. That was such a good overview. We don't have any questions in the chat. If anybody has any questions, please enter it in the live chat on YouTube.
Scott, I have a question.
Okay.
Are we capturing air at the point of release within the plants, or are we doing room size air exchanges and processing a lot of air?
For these agencies, great question. For these agencies, we looked at exactly what they're doing, and what they're doing is they're doing both that. They're, these agencies, for example, the Pacific Northwest Agency, everything's covered. It's actually, that treatment plant is actually utilized as a wedding venue. That's how contained odors are there. And there's very high ventilation rates in the buildings, and they're pulling off of head spaces of tanks. And so everything is buttoned up, everything is being ventilated, everything's being treated, and through multi-stage control systems.
Thank you. We do have a question if this presentation will be available for download. And this whole webinar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube. So maybe just note the minutes we'll get that right now, and we might be able to share the presentation as well, or the results at least. I think this is a great overview, Scott, and I'm thinking it may also be interesting to do a follow-up study with smaller agencies, because here you have, per capita costs would be really great as with more outreach and more have to implement more odor control to give them like approximate costs. If it's $5 per capita, that's really not that bad when you think about it, but it may look very different for smaller agencies. And of course, you had Southern California very densely populated versus the Pacific Northwest, where you don't have that many people, but they're still sensitive to the odors. So all that makes a difference.
I have a question. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Scott, I'm curious, what was the odor unit requirements? Let's say, for example, the Pacific Northwest. What is the odor unit requirement on the fence line versus Southern California? Because, what are we aiming for here?
For the Pacific Northwest treatment plant, that offsite odor goal was 1 D/T based upon 99% compliance, 1 hour average. So 1 D/T. So as far as my understanding, that's the most stringent offsite odor goal in the nation. That's my understanding.
Yeah. So I think this is a great discussion. We can pick this back up during the roundtable at the end of the session. We're unfortunately out of time, and we have another sponsor here, Pure Air Filtration. So we'll get that video going for 5 minutes, and then we will pick it back after. That's small. Thank you, Scott.